My name is Nina-chan, and the story I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely crazy. I know because I lived it, and I still can't fully believe it's real. It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in March when my best friend Sarah and I were sitting in our favorite coffee shop, the one with terrible coffee but amazing muffins. We'd been best friends since 3rd grade, 14 years of knowing everything about each other. Or so I thought. Sarah was scrolling through her phone when she stopped suddenly and looked at me with the strangest expression on her face. "Nina, do you remember anything about the orphanage?" she asked quietly. My heart did this weird flip thing. I had never talked about my adoption with Sarah, even though she'd known me since we were kids. I adopted it when I was 5 years old from Riverside Orphanage, but I barely remembered it. My parents didn't like to talk about it much. "Why are you asking?" I said carefully. Sarah turned her phone toward me. On the screen was a newspaper article from 2009, and my stomach literally dropped. The headline read, "Twin sisters separated at birth finally reunited after 14 years. But it wasn't about me and Sarah. It was about 2 other girls. Yet something about the story felt incredibly familiar. Sarah leaned closer, her voice shaking. "Look at the names," she whispered. The article talked about 2 twins named Jessica and Jennifer, who were separated when they were born at Riverside Hospital. Jessica was adopted by a family in California, and Jennifer stayed with relatives in our city. The girls didn't meet until they were teenagers at an adoption support group. My hands were trembling as I read. "Why does this matter?" I asked, but I already knew something huge was about to change. Sarah took a deep breath. "Because I did a DNA test last month for fun. Just one of those ancestry websites. I got some weird cousin matches that didn't make sense, so I went digging." She paused, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Nina, my adoption papers are sealed. My birth certificate is sealed. But I checked the orphanage records online, and my entrance date matches yours exactly. Same month, same year. We came in on the same day." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "That's just a coincidence," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing. Sarah shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. Look at us. Really look at us." I looked at her. I'd never really noticed before, but our eyes were the exact same shade of dark brown. We both had the same small birthmark on our left shoulder. We both naturally had the same way of tilting our heads when we were thinking. "We could be cousins," I said weakly. Sarah grabbed my hand. "Or we could be sisters." I called the orphanage this morning and told them I wanted to access my file. They said I need a birth parent's signature or written permission. But the director, Mrs. Chan, "Wait, that's your last name too." She seemed really interested when I mentioned coming in the same day as another adoptee. I felt something shift inside me. My whole life I'd felt like something was missing. My parents were loving and kind, but there was always this empty space I couldn't explain. Sometimes I'd see sisters laughing together and feel this weird pain in my chest. "We're not sisters," I said, but I was already pulling out my phone to look up the orphanage's number. "We can't be. That's impossible." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. Sarah squeezed my hand. "I know it sounds insane, but what if we are? What if this whole time the reason we became best friends, the reason we've been inseparable, is because something in us recognized each other? Don't you feel it?" I did feel it. I always had. And that terrified me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah. We met in 3rd grade when she was the new kid at my school. I remembered the exact moment. She sat down at my lunch table without asking, smiled at me and said, "We're going to be best friends." I believed her immediately. It wasn't weird or pushy. Felt like fate. We did everything together growing up. We had the same favorite colors, the same fears, the same weird habit of organizing our books by color rather than genre. Our parents used to joke that we were like twins. They meant it as a cute observation. But what if it was literally true? I got out of bed and walked to my mirror. I studied my reflection, trying to see Sarah in my face. I'd always known I was adopted. My parents had been honest about it. They chose me, they said. They picked me specifically. But I'd never met my birth parents. The adoption was closed, which meant there was no contact information, no way to find them. I never wanted to look before. But now everything felt urgent and electric. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Can't sleep either," the text said. I called her immediately. We have to check this out, I said. We have to go to the orphanage. Sarah was quiet for a second. I was hoping you'd say that. I already scheduled an appointment for Saturday. I told them it was about accessing adoption records. Saturday morning came slower than any morning in my life. I picked Sarah up at 8 o'clock, and we drove to Riverside Orphanage in complete silence. The building looked exactly like I remember, big, old, painted a pale yellow that was starting to chip. There was a garden out front that kids used to play in. I could almost see myself there. A small 5-year-old running between the flowers, searching for something I couldn't name. Mrs. Chun, the director, was waiting for us in her office. She was an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. When she saw me, her eyes widened slightly. You must be Nina, she said. I remember you. You were so quiet when you first arrived. You used to sit in the corner and watch the other children. My throat felt tight. I'm sorry, I don't remember much, I said. She smiled gently. That's okay. You were very young. Come sit down. We sat in her small office, and Mrs. Chun pulled out 2 thick folders. Sarah called me about accessing her records, Mrs. Chun said carefully. But something very interesting happened. I was going through our old intake files, and I found something I should have noticed years ago. She placed 2 documents side by side on her desk. At the top of each was a photo. One was me at age 5, small and serious-faced. The other was Sarah at age 5, nearly identical. My hand started shaking. These records were filed separately, Mrs. Chun explained. At the time it was chaotic here. We had a flooding incident, and records got mixed up. Different social workers handled different children. But these 2 files should have been connected. She pointed to a small note on Sarah's file in faded handwriting. It read, "Arrived with siblings, check records." Mrs. Chin's eyes were sad. But that note got lost in the shuffle. By the time anyone realized there might be a connection, the adoption process was already underway for both of you. Sarah and I stared at each other. Are you saying we were supposed to know about each other? Sarah whispered. I'm saying it appears you were sisters who came through our doors on the same day, and the system failed to make that connection, Mrs. Chun said quietly. I'm so sorry. This is a serious oversight from our organization. But now that it's been discovered, we need to do the right thing. She pulled out a 3rd file. I've been researching your background. You were found together. A woman brought you both in, said she couldn't care for you anymore. She left no contact information. We never found your biological parents. My entire body felt numb. We were found together? I asked. As infants. Mrs. Chun nodded slowly. According to the report, you were approximately 2 years old and 3 years old at the time. The social worker believed you came from the same family based on your similarity and the fact that you arrived together. I couldn't breathe properly. Sarah reached over and grabbed my hand, and her touch was like an anchor. What happened to us? I asked. Why were we separated? Mrs. Chun sighed heavily. Different social workers. Different agencies. Your adoptions were processed through different channels. By the time anyone realized the connection, both of your families had already completed their paperwork and taken you home. It would have been complicated and expensive to undo at that point. She paused. Frankly, I believe cost and bureaucratic convenience won over what was right. You should never have been separated. I looked at the files. My entire childhood suddenly looked different. All those times I felt like something was missing, like I was searching for someone. I was searching for Sarah. And somehow, without knowing why, I found her. Can we see our records? Sarah asked, her voice steady even though her hand was shaking. Mrs. Chun handed them to us. I read through my file with tears streaming down my face. There were the details of my arrival, medical assessments, notes about my temperament. Then I saw it. Accompanied by a female sibling, approximately 1 year older. Both in good health. Extremely attached to each other. Separation recommended to prevent future trauma. Recommended to prevent trauma. They separated us to prevent trauma. But they caused it instead. Sarah's file had almost identical language. We sat there reading the words that explained why we'd felt incomplete our whole lives. There's more, Mrs. Chun said gently. She handed us each an envelope. These were in your original files. Items that came with you. We're supposed to give them to you when you request your adoption records. I opened mine with shaking hands. Inside was a small handmade blanket, faded and worn, and a necklace, a simple chain with half of a heart charm. Sarah opened hers and pulled out an identical blanket and the other half of the heart charm. We stared at them. The two pieces fit perfectly together, forming one complete heart with our names engraved on the back. Nina and Sarah, sisters forever. I started sobbing. I couldn't stop. Sarah was crying too, and then we were holding each other in Mrs. Chen's office, these two broken hearts finally making one whole piece. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Chen said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "This should never have happened. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve answers." But we didn't have answers. We only had more questions now. Who had brought us to the orphanage? Were our biological parents looking for us? Were they still alive? Had they known we'd been separated? The mystery of our beginning suddenly felt urgent and important in a way I'd never experienced before. Over the next week, Sarah and I did everything together. We met constantly, comparing our adoption papers, our medical records, anything we could find. We looked identical in ways I'd never noticed before because I wasn't looking for them. We had the same crooked smile, the same way of biting our lower lip when we were nervous, the same weird double-jointed thumbs. It was like looking in a mirror, except the mirror was my best friend. One night, we sat in my room with all the documents spread across my bed. "We have to find them," Sarah said quietly. "Our biological parents. We have to know who we are." "I know who I am," I said, but I was already nodding. "I'm your sister. That's who I am." Sarah smiled sadly. "We're also someone else's daughters. Someone who might be looking for us." The next morning, I told my parents everything. I was terrified. I didn't want them to feel like I was rejecting them or suggesting they weren't enough. But they needed to know. My mom cried when I showed her the heart necklace and told her we were sisters. My dad held me and said, "We always wondered why you and Sarah were so close. Now I understand. You were meant to find each other." My parents agreed to help us search for our biological family. They connected us with an adoption agency that specialized in reunion cases. The agency worker, a woman named Jennifer, was patient and kind. "DNA tests would help," she explained. "We can search databases, contact other adoptees, look for biological relatives who might be registered." Sarah and I both took the tests immediately. Waiting for results was torture. I couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about this mystery person, this woman who had brought us to the orphanage. Who was she? Our mother? An aunt? A family friend? The blankets and necklace proved that whoever she was, she loved us. She wouldn't have left us those things otherwise. She wouldn't have made sure we stayed together if she didn't care about us. So why did she give us up? I started having dreams about it. In my dreams, I was very small, holding on to something warm and safe. A woman was crying. She kept saying, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm doing this because I love you." I'd wake up gasping, unsure if the memory was real or imagined. Sarah had her own nightmares. She told me hers too, very similar to mine. We wondered if they were actual memories trying to surface, or if our minds were just playing tricks on us because we wanted them to be real. "Do you think we'll find her?" Sarah asked one night. We were lying on the roof of her apartment building, staring at the stars. "I don't know," I admitted. "The records don't give us much to go on. No names, no descriptions. Just that she came in during the middle of the day in summer." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "What if she doesn't want to be found?" she asked. "What if there's a reason she gave us up and never came back?" I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then at least we have each other. We found what we were looking for, even if we didn't know we were looking." Sarah squeezed back. "You're right. You're right about that." The DNA results came back after 2 weeks. Jennifer called us with the news. "You're definitely biological sisters," she confirmed, which wasn't surprising anymore. We already knew that in our bones. "But there's more. You have matches in the database. Distant relatives. And one match is very recent." My heart skipped. "What do you mean recently?" I asked. "Within the last 6 months, someone uploaded their DNA to find relatives," Jennifer explained. "This person shares approximately 30% of your DNA, which typically indicates a parent-child or sibling relationship. There's a note attached to their profile. It says, "Looking for daughters born in 2007. Taken from me by mistake. If this is you, please contact me." I couldn't speak. Sarah grabbed the phone from me. "What's their name?" she demanded. Jennifer gave us the contact information. The name was Margaret Wu. There was an email address and a phone number. Our hands were shaking so badly we could barely hold the phone. "Should we call her?" Sarah whispered. "Or email?" I stared at the number for what felt like forever. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. I took a breath and picked up my phone. My fingers moved almost on their own, dialing the number. It rang once, twice. Then a woman's voice answered, and it sounded like she was crying. "Hello," the voice said. Are you?" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Hi," I said, and my voice cracked. "My name is Nina, and I think you're looking for me." There was a sound like the phone had dropped. Then the woman, Margaret, was crying openly on the other end. "Oh my God," she kept saying. "Oh my God. You're alive. You're both alive. I know you're both alive because Sarah's there, isn't she? You found each other." Sarah and I exchanged shocked looks. "How did you know our names?" I asked. Margaret's sob turned into something almost like a laugh. "Because I named you," she said. "I named you both before I had to give you away. Your father and I spent months picking your names. Nina and Sarah. The moment I held you both, I knew exactly who you were." The words hit me like a physical force. Our father. Margaret said our father was still alive. That meant we had a father somewhere. We had a family we never knew about. "I want to meet you," Margaret said urgently. "Please. I've spent 14 years looking for you. I never stopped. I hired private investigators. I checked databases constantly. When I saw your matches in the DNA system, I thought my heart was going to stop." "Where are you?" Sarah asked, finding her voice. "I'm in Portland," Margaret said. "About 2 hours from you. Can you come? Tomorrow? I understand if you need time, but I can't wait. I've already waited too long." Sarah looked at me. I nodded. We both knew the answer before she even asked. "We'll be there tomorrow," I said. That night I didn't sleep. I packed and repacked my overnight bag 3 times. Sarah and I talked on the phone for hours, just processing what was happening. We were going to meet our biological mother. The woman who had given us her name. The woman who had been searching for us for 14 years. "What if she's disappointed?" Sarah asked. "What if we're not what she expected?" "Then we're not what she expected," I said firmly. "But she's already proven she loves us. She named us. She made sure we knew we belonged together. That's all that matters." But I was nervous too. By morning I was a complete mess of emotions. My mom drove me to Sarah's apartment to pick her up. Before I got out of the car, my mom grabbed my hand. "This is big," she said. "Really big. But remember, you have people who love you and want you to be happy. Whatever you find out, we're here for you." I hugged her, grateful for her support. When I got into Sarah's apartment, I barely recognized her. She'd gotten dressed up, done her hair and makeup, and looked absolutely gorgeous. "You're nervous too," I observed. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "What if I say something stupid? What if I accidentally hurt her feelings?" We took the drive to Portland in silence mostly, just watching the road stretch out before us. The GPS directed us to a small neighborhood with quiet streets and flower-lined sidewalks. The address led us to a small yellow house with a flower garden out front. Margaret was waiting on the porch. She was standing with her hands clasped in front of her, and the moment she saw our car pull up, she started crying. Sarah and I got out slowly, suddenly feeling shy despite everything. Margaret looked so much like us, the same dark eyes, the same face shape. She was older, obviously, but I could see myself in her features. I could see Sarah too. "Hi," Margaret said, and her voice shook so badly she could barely get the word out. "I'm Margaret. I'm your mom." She didn't rush toward us or try to hug us. She just stood there, giving us space, letting us choose what happened next. Sarah walked forward first. "I'm Sarah," she said. "And this is Nina." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she whispered. "I've known your names for 14 years. Then Sarah was hugging her, and Margaret's arms came around Sarah like she was afraid to let go. I watched them, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. When Sarah stepped back, Margaret looked at me. "Hello, Nina," she said softly. I walked forward and she pulled me into her arms. She smelled like flowers and coffee and something warm that felt like home. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't keep you with me. I'm sorry for everything." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. We found each other. We're here now. We spent the next few hours in her living room, drinking tea and eating the snacks Margaret had obsessively prepared. She told us about herself. She'd been young when she had us, only 22. Our father's name was David. He'd been younger too, only 24. They'd been in love and reckless, and when David's family found out Margaret was pregnant, everything fell apart. His parents were powerful and controlling, Margaret explained. They told me I couldn't have children with David. They said I wasn't good enough, that I was ruining their family. They threatened to take everything away from him, his trust fund, his education, his future. David was weak. I loved him, but he was weak. Sarah reached over and squeezed Margaret's hand. "What happened?" she asked gently. "I got pregnant," Margaret continued. "Both times I got pregnant. When David's parents found out, they were furious. They hired lawyers. They told me that if I had the babies, they'd make sure I'd never see them again. David believed them. He wanted me to terminate the pregnancies, but I couldn't do it. You were my babies. I loved you before I even met you." Margaret paused to drink some tea, her hands shaking. "So I ran. I had you both and I hid. For the first few years we lived in hiding. I worked odd jobs. I couldn't register you to school or healthcare because I was afraid they'd find us. David's family had resources. They had private investigators looking for me. It was terrifying. I listened, understanding for the first time what must have happened. You brought us to the orphanage," I said quietly. Margaret nodded, fresh tears falling. "I had no choice. I was so sick and you were getting older. You needed education. You needed stability. I was doing everything wrong by keeping you hidden. One day a social worker found us. I knew the game was over. I made the hardest decision of my life. I brought you both in and made them promise you'd stay together. I left you with those necklaces and blankets so that someday, somehow you'd know you weren't abandoned. You were loved. We learned that David had eventually stood up to his parents and tried to find us, but by then, our adoptions were finalized and the records were sealed. He'd spent years trying to trace us through the system, but without knowing which orphanage or adoption agency had taken us, it was nearly impossible. Margaret had never given up searching. She joined online communities for birth mothers, posted on social media, and attended adoption reunion conferences. When she finally managed to get her DNA into the database about 6 months ago, she'd been checking the results obsessively, praying for a match. When we came up, she knew immediately. She'd recognize her own daughters anywhere. "Is Dad still around?" Sarah asked. Margaret's face brightened. "Yes. He's at work today, but he's coming over tonight. He's been working overtime to take time off to be here with you. He wants to meet you both more than anything in the world." That evening, our father came to the door. He was a tall man with the same dark eyes we all shared, and when he saw us, he actually fell to his knees. He didn't cry, he seemed too shocked to cry. He just kept saying our names over and over. "Nina, Sarah, my girls, my beautiful girls." We hugged him and it felt like we were finally truly whole. Over the next few months, Sarah and I spent as much time as we could with Margaret and David. We learned about our family history, about David's difficult parents who had passed away years ago, about Margaret's struggle with poverty and mental health while she was hiding with us, about the impossible choice she'd made to give us up. We learned that we had a younger brother too, which was shocking until we realized he'd been born after we were given up. His name was James and he was 12 years old. Meeting him was strange and wonderful all at once. He had our eyes too. Our whole extended family was starting to make sense. The DNA results had also connected us with some distant cousins, aunts and uncles we'd never known existed. One of them, our Aunt Linda, reached out with old family photos. She sent us pictures of Margaret pregnant with us, pictures of us as babies, pictures of our father holding us both in his arms. I looked at those photos and felt something shift inside me. I had a history. I wasn't born from nothing. I came from this family full of love and complexity and struggle. Sarah and I started going to adoption support groups together, not as best friends who happened to meet there, but as sisters who'd found each other through fate and bureaucratic accident. We told our story, and it resonated with so many people. Adoptees who felt incomplete, searching for their siblings. Birth parents who'd been separated from their children. The more we talked about it, the more we realized how common this was. We decided to take action. Sarah and I started researching adoption law, talking to lawyers, and learning about how many children were separated from their siblings through the system. We discovered that there was no requirement for social workers to check if siblings had come in together. There was no database matching system. If you weren't lucky like we were, if you didn't happen to make friends with your separated sibling, you might never know they existed. We started writing articles, talking to journalists, trying to get people to understand this was a real problem that needed solving. One local news station picked up our story, and it went viral on social media. Within days, we had hundreds of comments from other adoptees sharing similar stories. Some people had found their siblings through DNA testing. Others were still searching. The stories were all heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. A lawyer named Patricia reached out to us, interested in potentially changing adoption laws to require sibling checks. Sarah and I agreed to work with her on the project, which became something much bigger than we'd expected. We weren't just telling our personal story anymore. We were advocating for change in a system that had failed countless children. But through all of this, the most important thing was our relationship with Margaret and David. They had missed so much of our lives, and they wanted to make up for lost time. Margaret started attending all our important events. She came to my work celebration when I got promoted. She came to Sarah's art show when she finally decided to pursue her painting seriously. David came to our softball games and cheered louder than anyone else. They were trying so hard to be part of our lives, and honestly it meant everything. One day, about 8 months after our first meeting, Margaret sat us down in her living room. She looked nervous, like she had something important to say. "I know you have parents," she began carefully, "and I don't want to replace them. But I was wondering if you'd be comfortable calling me Mom. If you wanted to. Only if you wanted to." I looked at Sarah. She looked at me. We didn't even need to discuss it. "Yes," I said. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, absolutely yes." Margaret's face crumpled with emotion, and we all cried together. It wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about adding to our family. We had 2 moms now, and they both loved us fiercely in their own ways. The next week, David asked us if we'd like his last name. He wanted to legally change our names if we wanted to be Wu, like he was. It was a big step, and we thought about it seriously. My adoptive parents said they understood either way. But we decided yes. We wanted to honor that connection, that piece of ourselves that came from David. So I became Nina Wu and Sarah became Sarah Wu. We were officially part of the family we were born into finally. Our younger brother James became our constant companion. He absolutely idolized us, which was hilarious and sweet. He wanted to know everything about us. Where we grew up, what our favorite foods were, what we did for fun. He was fascinated by the fact that we were twins in everything but our legal documentation. "You're like the coolest sisters ever," he told us earnestly. "You literally found each other." Sarah and I laughed, but he was kind of right. We did find each other against the odds. We were separated by a broken system, but something stronger brought us back together. By now, the adoption law advocacy had really picked up steam. Patricia, the lawyer, had connected us with legislators who were interested in making changes. Sarah and I testified in front of a committee about our experience and the importance of sibling connections. We shared stories from other adoptees who had reached out to us. The response was overwhelming. People cared about this. People wanted change. We weren't sure if we could actually make it happen, but at least we were being heard. Meanwhile, my adoptive family and my biological family were slowly learning how to coexist. It was awkward at first, honestly. There were some tense moments and misunderstandings. But everyone loved Sarah and me, and that was enough to bridge the gap. We started having family dinners where everyone came, both sets of parents, James, our biological extended family, our adoptive cousins. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. One year after we first read that newspaper article in the coffee shop, Sarah and I were invited to speak at a national adoption conference. We stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and told our story. We talked about finding each other, about the system failures, about the joy of reconnection. And then we announced that new legislation had passed, the Sibling Connection Act, which required adoption agencies to check their records for siblings and attempt to keep them together when possible. It wasn't a perfect law, but it was a start. We'd helped make that happen. When we got off the stage, Margaret and David were in the audience, standing and cheering louder than everyone else. My adoptive parents were there too, and they joined in the cheering. I looked at Sarah, and we both had tears streaming down our faces. We'd come so far. From feeling like something was missing to finding out exactly what it was, each other. We'd been searching for each other our whole lives without knowing it. Now we'd found not just our sister, but our whole family. We'd found ourselves. That night, back in Margaret and David's house, we sat in the living room like we had so many times before, but everything was different now. We weren't strangers anymore. We were a family. As time moved forward, Sarah and I started a non-profit organization called Sisters Found. It was dedicated to helping adoptees find their biological families and to advocating for better adoption practices. We partnered with adoption agencies, DNA testing companies, and social workers to create resources that would help prevent other siblings from being separated the way we were. We received grants and donations from people who believed in our mission. We were able to hire staff and expand quickly. Within 2 years, Sisters Found had helped over 200 adoptees connect with their biological siblings or other family members. Each success story reinforced why we were doing this. We weren't just changing the system for ourselves. We were changing it for everyone who came after us. One of our greatest success stories involved twins from Australia, who'd been separated 40 years ago. We helped them find each other through DNA analysis and adoption records research. They got to meet at one of our conferences, and when they hugged for the first time, I cried harder than I had in years. That could have been us if we hadn't been friends. That could have been us if we hadn't met for coffee that day. The randomness of it sometimes kept me up at night. Sarah and I also worked on documenting our full family story. We collaborated with a filmmaker to create a documentary about our journey from separation to reunion. It premiered at a film festival and then was picked up by a major streaming service. Millions of people watched our story and learned about adoption, sibling separation, and family bonds that go deeper than genetics. The response was incredible. We received messages from people all over the world who said our story had inspired them to search for lost family members or to become advocates for adoption reform. Some people told us that watching our story had helped them heal from their own adoption trauma. Others said it had changed how they thought about family completely. I never expected our story to have that kind of impact, but I was grateful for it. It meant that our pain had purpose. Margaret started volunteering with us at Sisters Found. She wanted to use her experience as a birth mother to help other birth parents navigate the complex emotions that came with adoption. She was incredible at it. She had this way of listening without judgment and offering compassion even in the hardest situations. David helped with the legal side of things, working with Patricia and other lawyers to develop the organization's policies and procedures. James, now a teenager, worked in the office during summer breaks, helping with database management. It was truly a family operation. On the 5th anniversary of finding each other, we decided to do something special. We organized a big family reunion at Margaret and David's house. We invited our adoptive families, our biological families, our extended relatives, our close friends, and even Patricia, the lawyer who'd helped us navigate everything. There were about 50 people gathered in one place, all connected by the bonds of love and family. We took a photo with everyone. The biggest, most beautiful family photo I'd ever seen. Looking at that photo, I realized I'd gone from wondering what was missing to understanding that I'd never been missing anything. I'd been searching for a piece of myself, and I'd found her in my best friend. The evening of the reunion, Sarah and I sat on Margaret's porch like we had so many times before, but this time we held hands and didn't need to say much. "Do you remember when you asked me why I wanted to find our biological family?" Sarah asked. I nodded. "I was so scared," she continued. "I thought it might mean you loved me less, or that your family wasn't real. But it wasn't like that at all." "No," I agreed. "Love doesn't work that way. You can love multiple families. You can have multiple homes." Sarah squeezed my hand. "I'm just glad I got to find you first." Before everything else, I found you again. I squeezed back. We found each other, I corrected. That's what matters. Somehow we found each other. As I sit here now reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize that this story isn't really about finding our biological family, as amazing as that was. It's about the invisible threads that connect us to the people we're meant to be with. It's about how love can survive separation and bureaucratic failure. It's about how two people can go their whole lives feeling incomplete without knowing why, and then suddenly understand that they were searching for each other all along. Sarah is still my best friend, but now she's also my sister. Not just in the way that matters legally or biologically, but in every way that truly counts. We've built a life together. Not just as siblings, but as partners in a mission to help others find what we found. We've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, being present, and loving each other fiercely. It's about the choices we make every day to stay connected. It's about the coffee shops and phone calls and late-night conversations that keep bonds strong. I have 3 parents now and I feel so incredibly loved. I have a brother who makes me laugh. I have an extended family I never knew existed but can't imagine life without. Most importantly, I have my sister, the person I was searching for my whole life without even knowing it. And she has me. We found each other against impossible odds. Our story is proof that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from simply paying attention to the people who make us feel whole.